My job is actually to advise investors. That is pension funds and funds generally. So in effect, everybody here in the room is probably affected because your pension fund will be owning somewhere oil and gas companies. And my husband and I, we are both in the oil business, or have been in the oil business, and between us we actually have sort of 65 years experience, and we don't like the unconventional. We are much more interested in the conventional, and will become apparent why that is. So I'll take you through now, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on that graphic, because that is very important to understand. It's how the oil industry globally organizes itself. And what you have here on the bottom is a line, it's a cumulative production capacity. We are using about 90 million barrels of oil every day. And so Saudi Arabia and the Middle East sit here in this box, and on the vertical line there is the cost of producing that oil. So the lowest cost producer sits down here with its capacity, and then we're going up the curve to the highest cost producer. And this line here is the current oil price. So in a very simple term, everything that is above that line is out of the money at operation level. Everything below actually makes money. And immediately we see shale is out of the money right now. And there's only one thing that is actually even more loss-making, that is tar sands. And you might have seen in the financial press that Shell just recently cancelled the Canadian tar sand project. So OPEC's actions recently to challenge the shale producers, because they all came in when oil was $100. And OPEC saw that they're taking market share away. And they said, why should we, as the cheapest cost producers sitting down here, be the first to leave the market and leave the high cost producers in? Those amongst you who are farmers will understand this very well, because if you're the cheapest milk producer, you stay in the market, and the highest cost producer leaves. The same for cereals or anything. I mean, my kinsmen in Australia, where my husband is from, we are mutton producers, and the same thing is true for mutton. So now, OPEC has ceased to voluntarily leave the market, and they are going for market share, and they're pushing these guys on the top out. So what I'm saying is that shale was a child born in $100 oil terms. Now we no longer have that. The big oil companies are actually thinking, and OPEC too, thinking that low oil prices will be remaining with us for the next 5 years. And OPEC actually thinks in 25-year terms, and they're very afraid that in 25 years' time, a lot of the oil that's still in the ground will no longer be needed. They're fearing most what is called permanent demand destruction. And that means if renewables are biting into market share, that market is lost forever. They will not regain it through pricing. And so that's why they're pushing so hard, with low oil prices to gain market share, because they say, okay, we're losing revenue on the barrel, but we're making our box bigger. And also they're going into they're very big petrochemical producers with value add, etc. So they're actually not as poor as the FT would have you believe, that the reserves will only last another 5 years. Now, because we worked a lot for Middle Eastern producers, so they're actually quite secure. So that is very important to understand why shale is vulnerable.
Gundi, could I just ask you a very quick question, please?
Sure.
You're talking about the price per barrel of oil. We're talking gas here, which is on a slightly higher price. How does that impact this?
Gas, this is oil. I can show you the exact same graph for gas. Yeah? Because the Middle East, gas, you produce gas in Qatar for 25 cents an MMCF, or an MMBTU, which is the British unit. What the gas will be produced in shale, the very, very cheapest gas that you can get out of the biggest well, which are the small percentage of the pool, the cost is about $2.50, $3. The median, not the average, because the large wells pull the average up, the median is something like $4. I did a study for Martin Houston, who was the former CEO of PG Group, which has currently been taken over by Shell, for US gas, and we concluded that the bulk of the US gas needs $6 per MMBTU to break even. So at the moment, they're running, and I'll show you that in a second, they're actually all loss-making at the operational level. So this graph is equally true for gas and also petrochemicals, by the way, because we had just had to concern ourselves for a week with that. This is the next very important thing to understand, the difference between conventional and unconventional. Conventional gas wells or oil wells typically produce at a steady state, at a steady rate, at a high level. I mean, here I've put 400 barrels, can be anything. A good North Sea producing gas well does 5 million cubic feet, 20 million cubic feet a day. A shale gas well starts off high, but within 1 year, production has dropped 75%. That is a characteristic which is throughout every shale gas province in the US, and I've audited over 100 companies for clients looking at that. And so to actually, if you want to sell British gas, a steady amount of gas, and you have that decline curve, you got to drill a new well every 3 months to keep that going. And this is the typical pattern. This is what the US have done. It's continuous drilling. It's an industrialized operation. And the industry has become very good in the US at achieving that. The current record held, I think it's Cabot Energy at the moment, is to drill a well in 7 days. The rig is on a skid like a tram track and just moves along the pad. And I'll show you some pictures in a moment. This is more of a pattern by year. Each of these wells here, that goes back to 2005 and 4. So you see it's only really been 5 years in the US. So it's, in project terms, actually a relatively young industry. And each of these little bars represents the monthly production. And so you see how quickly each of these blocks falls off. So that's the year 2005. These are the wells from 2004, 6, and so on. So the production declines very, very rapidly. Every which angle you look at that, every which way you present it, that is a fact. And that fact is basically manifested in the financials. I've looked here at the 4 largest shale gas and oil producers in the United States: Chesapeake, Southwestern, Devon, and EOG. And when I say I looked at them, I actually read their P&Ls, their profit and loss accounts, their balance sheets, and their cash flows. So this is all derived from their own data. And in the last years, from 2008 to 2014, the published accounts show that cash from operation minus capital expenditure led to a negative of minus 62 billion. So at operational level. And the capital expenditure, in these accounting terms, it's sustaining capital expenditure. It's, for instance, the difference between, I go to a farming analogy. On the farm, if you buy a very big piece of kit that you depreciate over 20 years, or the little capital expenditure you make every year to keep the farm going. So the wells here, as we just see, because they deplete so rapidly, they have to be classified as sustaining capital expenditure and run to the profit and loss account. Every which way you call it, there is no money in it. And at this term, normally people ask me, well, why did it happen? Yeah, it happened because we had 0 interest rates, effectively, 0.25% interest rates in the United States. Companies were able to issue a lot of debt. You have something like $245 billion of junk bonds outstanding in the United States. And that was all raised in the last 5 years. So there was a lot of debt issuance because they pay coupons of 2 or 3%. But the junk bonds are now down 30 and 40%. So even though people collected their 2 or 3% over 5 years, the capital is already gone. They issued equity. And so it was kept going in a similar way as how we arrived at the financial crisis. There's a lot of financial products which went bust because there is money to be made very rapidly in the early days. So when I did audits for my clusters, I said, look, you got to understand the fundamentals, but they still punt the market. It's because everybody thinks they can understand when to leave the market, when to sell. But this reality is now well understood. There is not a financier or a fund manager out there who doesn't understand that. So their readiness to invest in a major way into an industry that has been shown to be hubristic and a Ponzi scheme is very low. There is no interest. I mean, I speak to financial investors in this country too, and I've never heard anybody getting excited about investing in UK shale. you can read a little article in the Investors Chronicle, which is addressed to retail investors who want to punt £1,000 here or there. Yeah? Because that's the iGas market. That's the market that these little companies are going for. But if you look at the amount of money needed to drill for shale, that's not going to be coming from iGas, which has a market capitalization of £60 million. I mean, it's just
So can I ask,
yeah.
against that background, what motivated INEOS to want to buy some of the licensed areas in Scotland, even though there's a moratorium there?
Yeah.
They're sort of gambling politically, you're saying they're also gambling financially. And Jim Ratcliffe,
INEOS are a petrochemical company. And if you remember, if you're going back to this graph here, petrochemicals, the same graph. INEOS sits up here. They derive their production from naphtha. The refineries are closing, so they have to get their petrochemical feedstock in the form of ethylene or whatever. They need to import it. So
they've bought tankers to import it from the US.
Exactly, they're bringing it from the US. But they're saying if we can actually have it underneath our own facility, or in the vicinity of our own facility, even though we might make a loss at that, it is still cheaper than actually bringing ethylene from the United States. So because the United States is a toll system, you don't buy your gas there or your ethylene at a fixed price. In the United States, if you get LNG, for instance, and I think they have LNG contracts, they buy LNG for the United States gas price plus the toll fee. At the moment, the US gas price is $2.50. The toll fee is $3.50. So we're already at $6. Then it's $1 for the transport. So we're at $7 per MMBTU. So even if they pay for their gas, $6.50, and they're making they're breaking even at that, they still save themselves 50p. That's their thinking. But also, INEOS, I think they're very bullish on that. They can get the top of the curve, the best Marcellus producer in the classroom, rather than the median, which is very average. So they're gambling, because for them it's a life or death question. Personally, I've just finished a big study for a client on petrochemicals, and the European producers are so disadvantaged. I expect INEOS to be one of the first closures, shale or no shale. So here we were, 62 billion these companies have lost. That's only 4 of them, It's only 4 companies. Now I want to talk a little bit about the United States, because I think it's very important to understand what you are seeing in the UK at the moment is the very, very beginning. People are making licenses, they want to drill 1 or 2 wells, but it's the early proof of concept stage. But when the concept is proven, one needs to understand how will it actually look and work when it is in full swing. Because no one just makes a shale gas application to drill 1 or 2 wells. With that decline rate, that's not going to get anywhere. So the intent is always to get the industrial production going. So this is the Marcellus area in Pennsylvania, one of the best gas producing areas. It has 16,000 unconventional wells. And you see they're actually organized by color. And the red dots were since January 2014. So you see the density and the pace at which all of that is happening. That is what a typical Marcellus site looks like. Because it's all about speed and having materials on hand. So you have the water storage here, then you have the frac trucks, very important, because once the well is actually drilled and it's being ready for frac, you need to have sand storage on there, and you need to have trucks on there. And this is 180 truck movements per day, and they're getting 1 well plus 1 frac per week. It's all about continuous drilling and continuous work, because that way you get the efficiency. And these companies, all of that is public data. It can be perused on the internet in their presentations. They are extremely proud of that industrialization that they have achieved. And so this is when it actually really works. And so will the UK get there? I think it will take a while before all of this machine power. You would see here between 20 and 25 specialist contractors on the site with their kit all on rental. So to achieve that type of industrialization, you need an enormous part of subcontractors, laborers, machine available. None of that really exists in the UK. That is why you don't have even the shale companies in the United States interested in the UK, because they understand they wouldn't make money here. This is why the whole idea of the promoters to let's us prove the concept and sell out, I don't think they have a market actually to sell into. So, right, the shale promoters, in my view, they're completely lack credibility. I've perused the list that Frank has sent me, where someone actually very diligently put together a list of who is in there. And Third Energy is a very good case in point. It's a private equity-owned vehicle. So hypothetically, they could get access to funds for some drilling. But the private equity owner, Barclays is the owner, they want to sell that unit at the moment. So they're in negotiations with the managers for a management buyout. It's been sort of rumbling on for several months. In this climate of low oil prices, continued low oil prices, high cost, I don't see that Barclays have any interest other than dressing, putting lipstick on the pig and selling it. And that's why they need to have the proof of concept. Most important point, I don't think investors, after their massive losses in the debt market in the US, the very high visibility of the high cost of that operation, are anywhere interested in funding that type of money, because this figure here, 96 billion, that is using the very best US practice and drilling the 16,000 wells, which is the low range number. So 96 billion, I can think of a lot better applications for energy security than spend it on a very ephemeral phenomenon. By the way, I gave similar talks on the topics of coal seam gas, which 5 years ago, 10 years ago in the United States started up and then became the big thing, coal seam everywhere. You know, Google coal seam United States, production has plummeted, no one talks about it. The whole boom lasted 7 years. Yeah? And I think we're going the same way here. Ponzi scheme. Again, this is sort of what you probably have seen. This is what Marcello's areas look like. So these are the well pads. And it's not only the well pads, yeah? They need access roads for the trucks, then there is the infrastructure to gather the gas. There's also how does the water get there. And a typical frac, a zipper frac, this is actually what some of the very, very biggest sites now look like. This is the water storage, this is the sand storage, trucks again. And a zipper frac uses 20 million liters for one frac. So that you need to have that on site because you can't wait for trucks to come. You need to have that all stored here. And so trucks will come and bring all that water, and then it's in the tanks, and then the tanks get moved on to the next pad. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4. So in Australia, in the coal seam gas area, which my husband and I have personal experience of, we've visited people up there, I've analyzed the companies that invested there. Farmers at first were very enthusiastic because they only saw one of these. I said, I get a little bit of license fee and fences repaired and this and that. But I mean, in northern Queensland, we visited, we have contact with farmers there, and if you run a priceless operation for feedlots, which is highly certified, and you have to explain how all of a sudden a methane residue turns up in the Japanese market that you're servicing, then your premium price point drops. That actually has happened to someone we know. 6 miles in northern Pennsylvania, Marcellus, between these two. This is from Google Earth. Again, this is all public information, so anybody can avail themselves, including UK politicians. And we see what it looks like in 2011, and this is what it looks like in 2015. This is shale gas. In the US, space, people are enfranchised. As you know, they get royalties, and some farming areas are not in Texas, some areas are just not that that high yielding. So you know, the income was quite welcome, but it was very ephemeral. And I'm going to finish with my last slide. This is something I just picked up from the US today, and it gives you the incidence of legal issues between companies and people on whose land they're dwelling. It's sort of organized by various topics here. And most of it, and this is basically 2014, second half, and 2015, first half. So as the oil price and gas price started to bite the companies, they basically stopped paying royalties, as they would. And so you see the incidence of litigation actually really increasing. So this is landholders suing companies for non-payment of royalties. And the fine print, and I've seen quite a lot of these, the fine print is always, it's a wellhead royalty. So the gas comes up on the wellhead, and the wellhead, you can then deduct all the costs that you incurred on getting that gas to the wellhead. And that interpretation is now very, very sharply enforced to the point that some landowners in the US are not getting royalties at all. Environmental protection is, which is basically health issues. Litigation is also rising. But in the US there has been a push that in litigation that the plaintiff has to furbish very accurately and prove the damage. And it's very hard with some health issues to do that. So oncologists in the States are just getting ready for that. But the big thing is, oil companies actually do break their contracts. So be careful out there.